Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Hart. I'm the Special Chief Inspector in Merseyside Special Constabulary. I'd like to thank everyone for dialing in today. One of the main reasons I am presenting this tonight is I currently lead on work stream 10 for welfare through the MPCC lead who has the portfolios for the special constabularies. My role is I'm building a model of support and wellbeing for all special constabularies across the country. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Police Mutual, who's our sponsor for the webinars, and everybody that has took the time to put this in place. There is going to be a question and answer session at the end after our guest speakers have spoken. So please, if you've got any questions or you want to ask anything, please keep your questions for the end and we will get to them. So thank you. So the first guest speaker tonight is Steve Hartthorne, who's the National Chair for the Police Federation of England and Wales.
Good evening and thank you, Laura. Everybody online, hi. Thanks so much for your time. I think at the moment we've got 43 participants and that will hopefully increase over the next hour. I thought it was important for me to come and speak to you today because this is the second such event. Sadly, I couldn't make the first one through work commitments, but Special Constabulary is quite close to my heart. For those that don't know, I started off as a special, I think back it was late 93, early 94, before joining up to become a full-time officer in 1995. So for me, becoming a special was an ideal route for me to get to understand the no policing, to see if it was the right fit for me. For many of you, it might be the same. For some of you, it's because you want that additional work to do to help the community. So a really big impassioned thank you for everything you do as a Special Constabulary in serving, helping, looking after the public, protecting them, the communities. I don't think they say it enough, but for me, as the chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, it's really important we say that straight away. So looking forward to tonight, we've got some good guest speakers. We've got Dave Brewster and Richard Gould who are going to speak around Op Hampshire and what does that mean? Well, a long time ago, certainly when I first joined, it was almost seen as fair game for police officers to be assaulted when they were executing their lawful duty, and it wasn't taken too seriously by the courts, if I'm honest. There was almost a view that it was part of your job, get on with it, stop moaning, and then we'll see what happens. Well, that should never have been acceptable in the first place. It's not acceptable today. And thanks to some great work by our colleague Dave Brewster, that's now retired, but was made a lofty rank of Chief Inspector in Metropolitan Police Service. He decided to do a little bit of work, and well, in fact, a lot of work around assaults on police. And then he came to the Federation, and we saw something in it and decided to push it around the regions and across the country to see if this could gather traction, because it's such an important aspect of policing that no one has the right to assault you when you're on duty, in the execution of your duty, protecting other people. And then through Dave and his ability to speak and negotiate and communicate with people, as you'll see in a little while, he got through to go to the College of Policing and then Oscar Kilo, and he has really taken this assaults on police process, the 7-point plan, Op Hampshire. I personally think it should be called Op Hamster in tribute to Dave and all the work he's done, because it is a real credit to his work that we now have a legacy in policing that protects all of us. So when we're out there dealing with the public and you get assaulted, things are in place now that hopefully in the force area that you work in, you can go on the local intranet, you should see the Op Hampshire process, and anybody should be able to go through that entire scheme from very, very start to the end to make sure that you, as a victim, gets looked after properly. So without further ado, I'll be handing you back to Laura, and then we can continue on for the rest of the show. So to speak, got a good presentation coming up, some interesting slides. The next guest speaker after day is going to be Richard, who I had the pleasure of hearing a while ago at a live event. Really, really interesting. I learned lots, certainly from him, about how we should be taking things forward. So that's enough from me. I'll be here until the end to answer some questions if you need to, but back over to Laura now, and then we continue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for attending tonight. It's really appreciated. So yes, Dave Brewster, Operation Hampshire Coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Steve. Thanks ever so much for that introduction. I do have a slide deck to work through for you all, and it's a pleasure to speak to you all this evening. as the introduction, as Steve said, I'm Dave Brewster. I'm a retired Met Police Chief Inspector. I'm now the National Operation Hampshire Coordinator, working for the National Police Wellbeing Service. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take you through what Op Hampshire is about, what it aims to achieve, the work we've done so far, and how it involves you, how it affects you. So my first slide, please, Lisa. Thank you. The most important thing for me with anything that I do throughout my career has been to explain why we're doing something, first of all. If we understand why we're doing something, the what and how generally fall into place. So Operation Hampshire, let's talk about why we're doing this, right? Policing is a risky old business, okay? That's not lost on me, certainly after 30 years in the job. The men and women that do this job face confrontation and violence and aggression on a very regular basis. Yeah, and as a result, you could say that being assaulted, because of the work you do, being assaulted is an occupational hazard, but it doesn't make it something you should accept. There is a massive difference between expecting something and accepting it as normal. It's not normal. The men and women that do this job, in my opinion, are awesome, right? It is a job like no other. You stand as the thin blue line between the vulnerable and the aggressor. Even more so, that applies to our special constable colleagues who do this on a voluntary basis. But what's often lost is that as the people that are service providers, if you like, to victims of crime, it's often forgotten that we actually deserve to be victims ourselves. We have a right to be treated as victims. You and the job you do and the men and women that join you have absolutely the right to the best levels of victim care, well-being, support and justice that we can provide for you. That's what Operation Hampshire aims to achieve. That's the idea behind it. Next slide, please, Lisa. So let's have a quick look about what Hampshire aims to achieve. Okay, none of this is overly difficult or technical. We're looking for a consistent approach to well-being, support and victim care. When I say consistent, it should be the same up and down the country. There should be a standard that we follow. It shouldn't be a postcode lottery. Our colleagues deserve to be looked after, and we should have a standard that is set for every single assault. We also need to consider the impact of every assault, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But every single assault, regardless of the injury, has a potential impact on the individual on the receiving end of it. I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. We need to make sure that we pursue justice for you. I say pursue justice because these are offences in their own right. They're not lesser offences. They're not subsidiary offences. They're not bolt-ons. They are offences against you as an individual in the office of constable and you as a human being, right? And we shouldn't be dropping them, NFAing them, discontinuing them for without good reason. And if we do that and we pursue that investigation and start treating these offences as serious, we should start to see an increase in criminal justice outcomes. Now, Richard's going to talk to you about the criminal justice element, so I won't steal his thunder with that. But we want to see people held to account. We've been given legislation, we've been given sentencing powers, or the courts have been given sentencing powers. Let's try and make the best use of it. We need to understand what exactly is going on out there. It's one thing having a figure and understanding the volume of assaults, which I'll talk to you about, but we really do need to understand a bit more about the context of how these assaults are happening, who they're happening to, in what sort of environment, in what sort of interaction, so that we can learn from it and try to do something about the risk and reduce it. But the most important thing, and this comes from you folks and the men and women around you, the people who do your job with you, we need a change in culture, right? Only the criminal justice process starts with us, right? If we don't report something, you can't expect anything else to happen after that. The culture has to change with us, and it has to start with the fact that we do not accept these assaults as part of our job. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. Thank you. So what have we been doing for the last few years? Well, when I stepped out of the Met and went on to secondment, in the last few years, we've achieved quite a lot to get Op Hampshire up onto a national stage. It is now a priority work stream for the National Police Wellbeing Service and the Police Covenant. For those of you who have not heard about the Police Covenant, it's a Home Office-led initiative that is looking at a number of elements of wellbeing for police officers. Operation Hampshire, thankfully, sits within that as one of its priorities. We've got an absolute top level of support from our stakeholders at the College of Policing, the National Police Chiefs Council, Unison, and obviously the Police Federation. And I will be eternally grateful to Steve for the support and Just about every level of commitment that he's provided me in taking this onto the national stage. We've got a really strong network. I've got a single point of contact, an Operation Hampshire lead in every UK force. So no matter what force you work in, there is someone at Chief Inspector up to Chief Superintendent level who's your Op Hampshire lead. We've been commissioning research into understanding the impact of assaults on repeat victims, so we can do a bit more about how do we intervene at the right stages to make sure that we are looking after people and recognising that these things creep up and have a detrimental effect as the volume increases. We've raised awareness. We have a dedicated Operation Hampshire internet page. The link to that will be in the chat bar. That was slick. There's an Op Hampshire internet page with a vast range of advice and guidance for frontline supervisors, officers, victims, etc., about how you can play your part and what we need to achieve. There's also a media campaign and new material, including a promotional video, that if you want to share that, we were lucky enough to get a proper video made, a professional video made, narrated by Rav Wilding, which is a couple of minutes to explain what Op Hampshire, the ethos of it, what is it all about. We've been offering training to supervisors, frontline supervisors, to make sure that every time one of our colleagues is assaulted, someone can get their arm around their shoulder, figuratively or literally, to make sure they're looked after. And all of that training material has been put into a new digital training package that will be available next month through the College of Policing. So you can tap into it and access it from home or from wherever and run through the Op Hampshire package to bring yourself up to speed. A really important thing for me is that we're developing a national police officer and staff assaults data set. We understand how many assaults there are a year, but we don't know anything about the context. That's something that will be driven through an annual data requirement that's been mandated by the Home Office, and we're working on designing that as we speak. Next page. So just to give you an idea of what's going on out there, it is increasing, and I think it is a national problem. In the last year, the last financial year, the last one that's been recorded so far, there were 41,221 assaults on your colleagues, right? These are assaults recorded on the Home Office classification of assault on a constable. Now, we can see that 28% or 29% of them were assaults with injury, but the vast majority, over 70%, were assaults without injury, right? But that doesn't mean they're not important. We're very, very good at dealing with assaults with injury, right? We generally do an excellent job when one of our colleagues has been significantly hurt. But we can't overlook the fact that the vast majority of these incidents are what are considered low level, all right? And I'll move on to that when I talk about impact. But that's an 11% increase on the previous year. And the previous year to that, it was like a 20% increase. This is going up and up. It's 113 assaults a day in the country on your colleagues, on you and your colleagues, all right? And that, to me, makes it a national problem. I would suggest, I'd probably argue that this is underreporting. I think it's probably a lot more than that, because anecdotally, I know there's officers out there that say, what's the point? I don't see the point in reporting it. Well, there absolutely is a point. Next page, please. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about impact and injury, because this is the bit that really does hopefully chime with people, right? We often hear people talk about assaults in a sort of detrimental way. We tend to play them off, right? We sort of roll with the punches a little bit. We hear people say, oh, it was an assault without injury. It was a low level assault. It was only a shove in the chest. What's the problem? Well, in my opinion, the only person that has the right to say it was only a X, Y, and Z is the person that's on the receiving end of it, because we really don't know how it's affected that person, right? If there is an injury, that is incredibly important. I get that. But we've got to start looking beyond injury and start looking at impact, because every single assault has a potential impact on the individual, particularly when we think about some of the things that go along with it. We talk about unseen impact on some of these offences. Now, I'll just touch on some of these. Think about spitting. Now, I know in my career I've been spat at a number of times, and one particular incident stays with me to this day, which I won't talk about. But often when people are spat at, they'll describe it as being vile. They'll describe it as, I'd rather be punched in the face than spat at. Now, if you just exacerbate that a little bit and start talking about, what if there was a potential for some sort of blood-borne or saliva-borne contaminant, which was particularly relevant during COVID? All of a sudden, you've got the anxiety of whether you've caught something, the worry of whether you're passing something on to your family. You might have to go for blood tests. If you go for blood tests, you might have to go on antiviral medication. Antiviral medication makes you feel ill, right? I know it does. So when you take that all back and right the way back to the basics, you feel ill because you're on medication. You have anxiety because you think you might have passed something on to someone. You're nervous about the fact you might have caught something yourself. You feel violated because someone spat at you. But in reality, that would be recorded as an assault on an emergency worker, common assault, battery type offence. It would be considered low level. But my argument is it really low level? Is it a low impact issue for the person on the receiving end? Because it might not be. Let's look at repeat victims. We have colleagues that are being assaulted 4 or 5 or 6 times in a year. That must have an effect on their confidence, their risk appetite, their ability to go forward when they would rather be going back. You know, it can affect a lot of things. Think about offences that are motivated or aggravated by hate. That's bad enough being assaulted because of the job you do. But when you're then confronted and abused or beaten because of one of your particular characteristics, again, very detrimental to the individual. And we think about the impact on our colleagues and our families and also on our personal life. Now, I put personal life in there at the end there quite clearly because this is why it's specific to you as special constables. Okay, your personal life is completely different to mine. If you get assaulted in the line of duty as a constable, it can affect you. It can affect your ability to earn a wage, and we can't lose sight of that. We also need to think about the impact on us as a profession, particularly where justice is concerned, if we don't start treating every one of these offences as significant and serious and trying to hold people to account for their offences and getting our arm around people and looking after them. We owe it to all of our colleagues to do this right. Next slide, please. So how can you play your part? Now, this is the thing. Don't underestimate your role in this. Don't underestimate your part, right? Because without you and without every single police officer and member of police staff in the UK getting on board with this, right, you are the key to making this successful, right? I know that forces have plans. They have Op Hampshire strategies and Op Hampshire plans, but a plan is great on paper. The real test comes on the day of the races when one of your colleagues is assaulted and how we react to it, right? So please, if you are assaulted, even if you think it's a minor assault, report it and make someone aware that it's happened. Because if it is a criminal offence and you've been assaulted, it should be recorded. And once it's recorded, we've got it and we know what we can start doing something with it. It's a bit like the thing about if a tree falls down in the woods and no one's there, does anyone know it's happened or does anyone hear it? Well, tell someone, right? And at least we've got a starting point. Please gen up on this. All of the information that can help you understand it a bit more is in the Oscar Kilo Operation Hampshire webpage. Yeah, and if you learn about it, please promote the initiative and tell other people about it because they need to know. You have rights as a victim. Yeah, you need to know what they are. I've mentioned the impact. Please consider the impact on your colleagues when one of them's assaulted. Your 5 minutes that you spend with one of your colleagues who's been assaulted can be a game changer. It can be the thing they never forget. That someone took 5 minutes of their time to ask how they were, ask how they were feeling, did they need anything, and spent 5 minutes just doing something. It's really, really influential, folks. I can't say it enough. You do it for a victim of crime outside of the police. Let's do it for our colleagues. Because if we listen to what people have got to say and we actually try to do something about what they're saying to us and what they're telling us, that goes a long way. The final point I'll make is please provide some feedback. Yeah, if someone does a good job, if you're the victim of an assault and someone does a good job for you, and makes you feel like you've actually been taken seriously, that says a lot. We'd like to know about it. I'm sure they'd like to know about it. And equally, if you don't get a service and you feel let down and you feel like you've been treated as a second-class victim, we need to know. Your single point of contact should know, right? Because we need to start holding people to account. This has gone beyond a nice thing to do, a good thing to do. It's something that is expected now, and rightly so. It's about time people started to see us as police officers and police staff as being important people. That should be the end of my slide deck. Thanks for listening and stay safe.
Thank you, Dave. And I can vouch for the work that you've been doing. I've done quite a bit of work with you in the past 12 months and how to improve it in relation to the special constabularies. So a big thank you on behalf of all special constabularies, really. So big thank you. Can I just remind everyone, if you've got any questions, you can either put them in the chat or wait till the end for the Q&A session. But yeah, keep them up. Our next guest is PC Richard Gould from the Met Police. He's an officer now, but he is a former magistrate. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Are we on? There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much, Dave. I've probably heard you speak now half a dozen times, and every single time your enthusiasm really is palpable. And having traversed the cavern of the criminal justice system to now being a police officer, it really is so apparent and so obvious why this is really, really important for people. So thank you for the opportunity to just share a few perspectives with people this evening as well, because actually there's some small steps that we can take individually and collectively that will make a massive difference when it comes to assaults on us as emergency workers and the criminal justice system. So next slide, please. So for me, there's 5 key areas when it comes to pitfalls that gets us from the unfortunate situation of being assaulted through to a successful conviction. I'm going to focus on 2 today, but I'm just going to share a few points on all of them, because some of them aren't in our control, but I think we do need to be aware of them so we can influence and we can maybe have the conversations with our supervisors and with our colleagues if we do not believe that the other dimensions are coming together in the way that they need to. The first is around supervision. Really important. We need to make sure that those around us and those that supervise us recognise the importance of managing any assaults on us in the right way. That means preserving the scene. That means the investigation taking place thoroughly. That means case files being prepared properly, getting the right CPS charge, making sure that cases go into the right gap or end gap, so guilty or not guilty anticipated plea areas. And I know as police officers, we work really hard to try and get everything together so it's boxed off and ready for somebody else to move forward. And sometimes we probably take for granted that those who are the custodians of moving that forward are going to do or be as diligent and thoughtful as we have been. So I think it's important to make sure that our supervisors do not take the path of least resistance and avoid some of the things that will really help to ensure that we get a conviction. The second is around statements. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The third is around extended released under investigation and bail. And again, one of the pitfalls sometimes there is that we allow these cases to run on for so long that evidence is lost, victims victims as in police officers as well, sometimes rationalize it away as thinking, God, that was so long ago. I just want to move on now. I don't want the hassle. I don't want the distraction. I don't want the extra work of having to pursue it. And sometimes we are in the unfortunate position where the statutory time limit expires. Conflicts of interest, and another area where we can get tripped up, and a diligent Crown prosecutor or a diligent defence barrister can pick holes in areas where we, for what we believe are the right reasons at the time, take particular course of action, but on hindsight they can conflict our case, and they include things like us investigating our own offences, us as police officers interviewing suspects, creating or updating crime reports, and having sight on CPS or ERO rationale that may prejudice our future victims' right to review. And I suppose as police officers, it's quite hard to let go of things, and probably even harder when we have been involved and we are victims. But we just need to be really cognizant of where that line is between being involved and being interested because you are a victim of crime, but also being or not letting go to the point of trusting others to pursue the allegation and the assault to the extent that it could cause you a problem further down the line. And the last area, which we'll come on to in a second, is court. So if you could just move on a couple of slides, that would be great. So if we just, for a minute, think about how it all comes together, there are a number of things that come into play. Body-worn video is, having sat as a magistrate for 17 years and seen a real prevalence of body-worn video evidence over the last probably 7 or 8 years, is one of the best pieces of evidence that anyone could ever have in court. The challenge is, for whatever reason, so many times it doesn't end up in court. And I don't suspect it's because we haven't had it on. I don't suspect it's because we don't want it to be shared. I do suspect that it gets lost in the process somewhere. And I do suspect that we probably miss the opportunity just to make sure it's where it needs to be and with who it needs to be with prior to a case taking place. And that's relevant for both sentencing when it comes to working out the severity of that sentence, but also and especially when it comes for trials. I said to Dave last year when I was still a magistrate that, having looked back over the last 12 months and look at some of the statistics that were coming out of London, which is a good proxy, I think, for criminal justice centres across the UK, only in about 34% of cases was body-worn video being exhibited as evidence. And we all know as police officers that it is only in exceptional circumstances that we would not be using our body-worn cameras to record an incident. So something doesn't seem to be right there. So if there's one thing that we can take away from this, make sure that we're using our body worn as evidence in court, because I've convicted more people based on body worn evidence because it's just binary. You did it or you didn't do it, and having to or as opposed to having to listen to lots and lots of police witnesses who sometimes tie themselves up in knots anyway. So go for the easier path on this one and make sure you've got body worn video. The other point before I go into detail on courts and statements is, please do not downplay the assault. I hear officers even last week downplaying what happened to them when I've been with them, and I've had to G them up as to challenge them in terms of that isn't what really happened. Let's have a look at the body worn and really think about what happened. And if we were looking at that body worn through the same lens of CCTV, which we had managed to get on behalf of a victim who had been assaulted, what would we be pushing for? What would we have seen that's different to us sitting in that same frame as a victim? So a couple of examples. I was more annoyed that my trousers were ripped, making no reference to the impact of the punch to the face or the kick to the groin. Another statement including the phrase, "I recognise that being assaulted is inevitable in the course of what we do," making no reference to having been bitten or punched numerous times. Another one, "It really hurt, but I just got on with the job in hand. He just had to be arrested," making no reference to requiring 5 stitches to a cut on the forehead. And another one, "I know it's just part of the job," making no reference to the chipped front tooth and deep lacerations to the lip. If we rationalise this sort of stuff away, we are never going to be able to protect that thin blue line and make sure that those who do commit offences against emergency workers are brought to justice and the full extent of the law is laid down, in front of them. And we are fortunate now that the maximum custodial sentence for Section 39 common assault on an emergency worker is now 12 months. Clearly, more serious offences commensurate of ABH and GPH, justify and render greater sentences. But even for common assault, there are custodial sentences available, and we need to make it easier for judges, magistrates, district judges to understand where it sits in the sentencing guidelines, make rational decisions, and not make it easy for them to go with something that is not commensurate with what actually happened. So I'm going to dive into 2 areas just quickly. Next slide, please. So statements. if there's one thing where you can become an expert at as a police officer in a short amount of time, it's writing statements. I don't think there's probably one shift where you are not writing an MG11, whether it's you as an arresting officer, as a witness, or taking an MG11 from a victim. What we need to do is make sure that we do not forget that we are a victim, and a statement should be taken by another officer. We shouldn't underplay what happened. Again, just making reference to the points I made on the previous slide around some of the things you hear vis-a-vis what has actually happened to an officer. Think about the quality of evidence in the same way that we'd think about the quality of evidence from a victim. Now, ask yourself those questions that draw out the experience, the feelings, the impact, and the consequences of what's happened to you. Take your time. This is one time when adrenaline may not be the best thing for helping with recollection of what's happened. You don't have to do it straight away. Get some time to take stock, reflect on what happened, and replay what happened in a way which brings to life the best evidence. And make sure, as both Steve and Dave have said, before me today, that you lean into support. Support is available. And actually what I've seen from colleagues is it's not the impact that is masked by adrenaline during a particular shift. It's the next day or the next set or the next month when you get a call to a similar incident, which is always, in my experience, a non-griefy incidents which turn into a bit of a shit show. So how do we make sure that we're looking after ourselves, and then we are putting our best foot forward when it comes to collecting the statement, which will be a key part of any evidence that allows a court to make a decision. Next slide, please. On the statement side, and I'm not going to read through all of this, but the victim impact statement is really important too. And when we talk about the impact, it's not just a physical injury, it's a psychological harm and distress. It's whether you've been a repeat victim. It's whether this has had an impact on your family life. And as Dave said, for people who are the victims of someone who has spat at them, it's a course of treatment that can take 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and the impact that uncertainty and that nervousness and that distress can have on your family life. How has your life changed as a result? How do you now react to similar calls? Are you more nervous about going to particular calls? Are you more inclined to default to uses of force when before you may not have been, because your awareness is more heightened and you are trying to mitigate the risk? Think about the additional support that you've required and make sure you capture that in your victim impact statement, and make sure that any ongoing impact on this crime on your life is captured too. And one of the good things about victim impact statements, when you think about the amount of time it can take for cases to go to court, is that these can be written at any point. And there may be 1, 2, or 3 victim impact statements, and that's okay. So capture one within the first few days, which reflects what happened to you and how you are feeling. For more serious assaults, capture another one a few months down the line when it is still sitting in the back of your mind and you're holding on to it, and the impact is starting to manifest itself probably in more tangible ways. We move on to the next slide, please. And this is something that probably is out of our control, but I know so many forces are really focused on now, and that's the organisational impact statement and the opportunity for forces to bring to life the impact of assaults on their officers. And I encourage our supervisors or duty officers to read this out in court. I encourage them to make it really personal to the area in which you are serving as a police officer. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Local summary justice means that the people who administer justice in magistrates' court are, on the whole, people who live in the area, because the premise of summary justice is that you are tried by your peer group. and people of good standing in the community. So if a supervisor or a duty officer is able to bring to life the impact of their officers not being able to deal with the antisocial behaviour that occurs every Friday night outside the chicken shop because they're now scared of what would happen to their officers, that may mean something. If they talk about the local park, which families can no longer go to, or grandparents can no longer go to with their grandchildren or children on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon because antisocial behaviour means that people have left syringes there and police officers often get assaulted there. That again brings to life the challenges that it's having on the local community. So they tend to listen. They tend to empathise more because there is an impact on them of assaults on police officers and the risk it has on police officers going to the sorts of crimes that become a nuisance for them in the communities in which they live. Next slide, please. And then court. Being there is really important, and I think we should, as a police service, move to it only being by a rare exception that we are not in court, so that we are visible if we are victims of being assaulted. Because if we are not there, it helps people rationalise away the perception that this is part of the job when it's not. We need to humanise it. And the next point brings to life why this is so important, because wearing plain clothes means that we are not turning up in that uniform and the perceived armour where quite often people think, well, they're police, they should have a higher tolerance level. Oh, they're police, it's part of the job. It was only a push, it was only a slap around the face, it was only this, it was only that. Wearing plain clothes just puts you in a perception level in the same place as others in the courtroom. You're humanizing yourself more than you'd think. And as I've seen before, the police officers who come in as if they've just rushed out of the car in the middle of a call with their radios on and their PPE around their waist and everything else are far less convincing than somebody who comes in, reads their own statement in plain clothes and has an element of passion around what they are saying and an air of being a victim of something that is really, really important for the courts to deal with. Be prepared. Make sure that you've got your MG11. Make sure you've got a copy of your body-worn video footage. Make sure you've got your victim impact statement. Make sure that you've got any other supporting evidence, and especially anything that may support a claim for compensation. Why is that important? Especially for trials. Quite often, the CPS now is being staffed up by agents. They pick up, probably all the cases they're dealing with at 9:30 in the morning, go into court at 10 o'clock and read the case summary and will proceed on that basis. A defence advocate, on the other hand, will have had probably 3 or 4 meetings, had the papers for at least 28 days and will know it inside out. What we need to do is make sure that we are helping the CPS to prosecute in our favour and get the right results. And if that means we need to remind them that there is body-worn video footage, and do you need to take a short adjournment just to look at it and share it with the court, then let's do that. Let's take some responsibility for what in other circumstances would be failings on parts of the criminal justice system that should be there to support us. Likewise, a victim impact statement, get up into the box, read it out. Don't hide behind a sense of bravado. Really bring to life what it meant to you, to others, for how long, and how it affects the job that you're doing now. Next slide, please. And this is just something for us to be aware of. There are currently 2 pieces of legislation in the statutes that govern assaults on police officers and emergency workers. The first is assault in a constable in the execution of their duty. Section 89 of the Police Act 1996, maximum 6 months in custody. The second is a newer piece of legislation, 2018, which is assaults on emergency workers, which is triable either way, so can be in a Crown Court or a Magistrates Court, and has a maximum sentence of 1 year's custody. There's a subtle difference on these. Assaults on emergency workers is not dependent on you exercising your duty as a constable. So, for example, If you are speaking to someone quite innocently and all of a sudden the situation changes, they're aware that you're a police officer and they assault you, then if they're charged with assault on an emergency worker, that is absolutely something that could go to court and they can be sentenced and found guilty for. On the other hand, assaults a constable in the execution of duty is legislation that only covers assaults where you are executing your duty. So, for example, stop and search, and you get assaulted as a result. As part of that stop and search, you do not go through the sufficient components of Go Wisely that ensures it's a lawful search. If in court, a defence advocate can argue that that search was unlawful and therefore that you were assaulted, not in the execution of your lawful duty, that is something that can get kicked out of court. So the easiest offence is always assault on an emergency worker. It's the one which has the maximum custodial sentence and provides end-to-end cover for us. As long as we have identified ourselves as a emergency worker, as a police officer, if we get assaulted, that's the one that covers us. Now, there's a couple of pieces. I just want to flick through probably 4 or 5 slides. I'm going to make sure these are available to everybody, but there's a few pieces here before we open up for questions. I just want to signpost people to, so when you do access this information, it means something to you. Just jump forward 5 slides for me, please. No, sorry, back up. Sorry, my fault. Back up to the one which is understanding the legislation. Down 2. One more. That's, yeah, okay. So there's 3 components when it comes to sentencing, or 4 components actually. There's culpability, which is whether it's high culpability or lesser culpability, and this is all about the role that the suspect or the person who has been charged has played in the offence. Did they use substantial force? Did they prevent us calling for assistance? Was it part of group activity? And if we are aware of the things that determine whether a judge or a magistrate will determine whether this is high culpability, it helps us when it comes to our evidence. Now, let's be clear around the circumstances of that offence. It was late at night. They used substantial force. They prevented me from calling assistance. It was a group activity. They used a weapon, or they used shod foot or kicked me. Every one of those things moves it up the scale when it comes to sentencing. It moves it well out of a conditional discharge or a fine or even community order, and it starts bringing it up to the custodial level. The other piece around it is harm, and there's 3 categories there, whether it's minor physical or psychological harm, which is category 1. Category 2, whether it's minor physical or psychological harm or distress. So, sorry, category 1 is more than minor, category 2 is minor, and category 3 is not very much or low. So, we should think about the number of injuries, severity of the injuries, the pain suffered, the amount of time that it's taking you off work as a result of what's happened. And the most important part that I think we need to make sure we are aware of is aggravating factors. Again, when it comes to sentencing people for these offences, there is a structured sentencing process people have to go through. And that's really to ensure there's consistency. The first thing you look at is culpability. The second thing you look at is harm. And the third thing you look at is aggravating factors. And there are 12 aggravating factors for this offence. And as I said, they're captured in the slide as bullet points. And they include things like deliberate spitting or coughing, offence committed in prison, which is probably not relevant for us, but presence of children, offence committed in a domestic context, abuse of power and opposition of trust, steps taken to prevent the victim reporting an incident or obtaining assistance. So if we're aware of where it sits in terms of culpability, if we're aware of where it sits in terms of harm, and we are aware of where we are on aggravating factors, it allows us to make sure that we are positioning what happened to us in the best possible light for when it comes to structured sentencing decisions to be made, that people get the right sentences. Because I know and I hear time and time again the frustration from colleagues about assaults that by the time it gets to court, they're getting a conditional discharge, or it's being no further action because there's a more serious offence. If we make sure that we are capturing exactly what happened to us in a way that can be interpreted by the judicial system commensurate with the sentencing guidelines, I personally think and have seen, better sentencing for these kinds of offences. So I'm going to stop there now because I'm keen to make sure we do open this up for questions for people as well. And as I said, the slides are available. More than happy to share my contact details. If anybody has any questions around it, then more than happy to pick them up offline with people as well.